Okay, let's get started with working with some color. Doing a little pastel work here. I've got my paper cut down, not cut down, but I just pulled it in half and then gave myself about 5 inches, 4 inches on either side. So it's a lot smaller in format. It's probably more like 9 by 12 the format here. For our subject, that's small, but for our subject, that's going to be fine. I've got my image that I'm working from. I don't have a color printer, so I'm using my laptop. You can see it here. I'll send this image to you. It's an apple sitting on a table, and I think our beginning should be rather straightforward and simple, and then we'll work our way on to more complex things. But I've got it within sight here, and what I've begun the drawing, just so that it makes sense in our progression of projects, is I started with a layer of charcoal as though we're going to do a subtractive drawing. Okay, I didn't go as dark as in the peppers because that was a black and white drawing. There was a real dramatic contrast between light and shadow. Here I want a foundation. I think it's important that in working with pastel that you eliminate the potential of having white paper showing through in between, because you know the pastel leaves a grainy quality just like charcoal does, and in the subtractive process we've covered the paper for that same reason, so that when we develop the drawing and add charcoal, we're not having these white specks of paper showing through that can give the drawing an irregular, unfinished look to it. So one thing I do want to start out with mentioning is one thing that I want to teach you with pastel is to get away from the need to feel as though you've got to blend your color. One of the problems with pastel, when you blend the color, you're actually taking it off. Whether you're using your hand or whether you're using a blending stick, you're removing the strength of the color. So we're going to work the pastel by layering it, one on top of the other, one color, one value on top of the other. So I've erased in my shape here. Sorry about this. I'm fighting with a laptop which likes to keep shutting down. I want my image to come back up. Bear with me. I have to touch this periodically so that this doesn't continue to happen. So I erased in my apple shape, and now I've not erased it cleanly. I still have some gray from the charcoal on that surface. Now I want to begin by blocking in some color in that negative space. So of course your apple is red, so I'm going to take my red pastel and I'm going to start by applying it in the lighter area that I've suggested in my erasing. Again, use the flat side, okay, not the corner. Work it here and spread out to the outer boundaries. I'm going to generalize the application here. Okay, now if I'm looking at my photograph, I realize that the red of the apple is not of this intensity. It's really in a deep red. So now I want to lighten it up, and as if I were painting, because you are painting in drawing material here, is I'm going to lighten it up by using a lighter color, not white, because white isn't a color, it's a neutral. And so if we're looking at an alternative, well, if I can't use white and I want to lighten the color, what am I going to use? Think to your painting experience, because I know both you, Lauren, and Sophia have had painting before, so you're aware of this, use a lighter color. In this case we're going to use yellow. And I'm just going to work the yellow right on top here. I see it being lighter in this area. Okay, so I'm going to apply this yellow on top, flat side. Now I'm going to blend it with my fingers. You see how the yellow is blending with the red without needing me to actually use a blending stick or to use my fingers to create a softer appearance. Bring it down here. Alright, so let's restore a little of the redness. Even where the darker part of the apple is the shadow that's right here. I'm going to come back now with my red again, and I'm going to use that to blend. See that? See how the grainy quality is subsiding now? Use a lighter touch. And get a little more red in this back, but you see now what I'm getting is an orange, which is closer to the red that's in the actual image here. I'm also going to take a little of my black that I used from the onset, and I'm going to place a little of it here to indicate the shadow. Okay. Now I think I'm going to break this into a smaller piece, and yeah, you're going to have to break your pastels as well to create a smaller chunk to allow you to manipulate the color in these tighter areas. And while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and establish a little heavier application of dark underneath the apple to begin to set that component of the drawing as well. Okay. I'm going to come back with my red on top of this. And I'm going to take a little more black again. A little over. Okay. But try not to use this. If you do want to blend, as we did with charcoal, if you just can't avoid it, go back to using a napkin. And now you can fold it into a smaller piece and just lightly begin, not with a lot of pressure, because you'll find that you're going to take a lot off. You see, that's why we want to try to avoid doing this and instead go to a blending process. Okay, I'm not liking the way that looks now, so I'm going to come back and apply a little more of that black again. Okay. Alright. And then the red over this area here, where the red of the apple starts to appear slightly juicier. Now I also want to do a little work in the background, because I can't appreciate my color yet because the background is so bland. I've got a green shade back here. So I'm going to grab my green and I'm going to start to work it in the negative space here. And I'm not going to worry, and I'm going to go ahead and get some over that stem in the apple. I see it all the way around on this side. I'm going to come back and work it here. Come tight all the way to the apple. And I see it all the way down here. The green is darker, but right now we're going to work our way down to that. I want to get some color here first. I'm going to come tighter to the edge of the apple. I'm going to make that boundary a little cleaner. You get really tight red against the green. And if they overlap, that's even better. That's going to give you more of a painting edge rather than a hazy, uneven one because of the grainy quality of the charcoal. I still can control the shape of my apple either by working inside of it or in the negative space. I can change the shape. Okay, and I've also see some in the tabletop because it's a glossy material and so the light and color are reflecting. Come over that shadow a little again as well. Okay, I'm going to come back with my red one more time and I'm going to start to apply it even heavier, and I'm going to use a less even stroke and try to get rid of a little more of that graininess by layering some more in there. And I'm also going to come out and play with the shape of my apple and make it more distinct against that background. I'll do the same thing over on this side. And look at what's going on up at the top more carefully. Curve here, it's kind of, that's what most apples are, kind of have a cloved shape. Here. Okay, bring back some more yellow, so you're just layering and layering and layering. I drop my going to strengthen is a nice bit of yellow or light right in here, and then this is going to eventually be paler with some white for the strong highlight, but I'm not going to get to that till later. And there's also quite a bit of yellow right around this indention in the center core of the apple. I'm going to strengthen my shadow one more time and extend this height. It's a little higher coming along in here. I'm going to use that to articulate the shape. Okay, there we go. So now our apple is starting to come to life a little more. I'm also realizing that my background begins to intensify in darkness as it goes away from the center. So now I'm going to come back and apply a little more charcoal to get that more dramatic lighting effect in the background. Across over here as well. And just like in painting, you have a rough beginning and then it begins to soften the more you build up the paint surface. In actuality, I think it's better that you have had painting before and have some understanding of color mixing and process of build-up rather than going into it with a little less experience. I live by the airport, folks. So you're going to hear some planes periodically. Okay, now I'm going to come back with the green again here and go over that black so that it's not so negative in color. Be careful around the boundary of my apple. I lost my stem, but I'm going to put it back later on. See that? Even in the tabletop. There's a trace of green. Now I could also make the green as a painter would by mixing it. I'll give you an idea of that in a second. Okay, I'm going to take a little blue, break it down, smaller chunk, put a little blue in here. Again, thinking like a painter. Some of you have had color theory as well. That can come into play here, your knowledge of color mixing from color theory. And now I'm going to come back with some yellow. Oops, what did I do with my chunk of yellow? Here it is. Yellow and blue make green. So now you have a slightly different green now, one that's a little cooler and maybe more appropriate for what we're looking at in this particular example. And then I'm also going to come back with a little black again. And just going back and forth and layering and getting the mixture to happen. Now I asked you all in terms of supplies to get some fixative, and I think that can come in real handy right now as well. Okay, I'm going to take the green that I initially used and come back over and smoothing this out now. Starting to shape up. And make sure I don't forget to do that down here as well with a little of the green. Now you have a dark back here that isn't so black, colorless, because now it's got a little color in it by the use of the blue and the green running through it. I've slightly suggested my table edge here. Now I want to make sure I go into the tabletop as well. I'm going to darken that later as well. Okay. Alright. Now, another thing with regard to blending, if you can't resist, again, is a Q-tip, which has got a softer tip than a blending stick does. And so you can use a little of this to work that pastel around. So you have to be careful because this pastel will come off real easily. Another reason for using your fixative. Now when it gets dirty, that can come in handy and be to your advantage because it's actually going to smear color and get rid of the graininess, but it won't be such an obvious change. So take in a little of that right here. Okay. Now if you're going to use fixative, it's always good to remember, don't spray so close. You always want to be about 12 inches away and always moving that fixative. Remember, there's a difference between fixative and workable fixative. Workable fixative allows you to continue to work on the drawing, but it kind of helps hold the work that you've done in place. Okay. I'm going to use it to kind of clean my edge a little. I want to make it look like I've outlined that area. got the gist of this. I'm going to come back with red again. It's just like painting, layering and building up the color. And I'm going to lay a little more red here. Maybe make sure I move my pastel in different directions. Hit my edge again to make sure. I'm going to curve this. It's got a little squared edge here. Pulls that out. Pulls that out here as well. In the image, the apple looks like it's leaning or toppling over because of its uneven shape. So now I want to establish that by changing the outer edge. And you see how easy it is just to let it grow, and it goes right on top of the green. Right? I want to strengthen that shadow again. So what do? Come back and reach for some more black. And even with the black, I want to move it in different directions. I also noticed a little trace on the edge here. Okay, now it pulls that little bit of work just pulled it away from the background. Same way down here. I'm going to work a little of the edge of the apple by putting a stronger shadow underneath, and this shadow just kind of blends out here and almost connects to the background up here.
We're going through puddles, and there's like on like the incline on some of the streets, you know how they incline down? Yeah. There's like pool water, like little stream going along the side of the road, and as soon as she hit that, she starts running. She'll hit that water, she starts running.
Alright, now that you got a report on how the dog next door liked the water from the rain, I'm going to put a little yellow in here. It's reflecting. It's a reflection of the color in the actual apple. So that means I also have to have a little red in there too, to give us an echo and allow the viewer to understand that this color on the table is a reflection of what's happening in the color of the apple itself. Now, one last thing, I'm going to stop recording and continue to work on this and pick it back up, is, you know, it should not be a hidden process. By that I mean, is it should look like a drawing, okay? Your goal is not to make a pastel look like a photograph, because it's not a photograph, it's a drawing done with material that is grainy in quality, done by hand, and should feature those qualities that do make it seem alive with the energy that comes from working in material by hand. I'm going to straighten this edge of the table to kind of line up all the way across. I'm going to hide its identity a little, the sharpness of the edge, and once again I'm going to come back and go over the black that I've added here to take away its neutral quality, because like white, black is not a color, and of course we're wanting to draw in color, so we got to use a material that definitely, even put a little green over the shadow, well, not shadow but highlight, to indicate that the color green is also reflecting and moving around composition. Alright, let me just use, I'm dropping all my pastels here, folks. Okay, so let's pause for a moment and we'll pick this up again in a later stage. See you on the flip side.